Today's guest is Lisa Speers, and she describes herself as a midlife enthusiast, which, no surprises, I love that term. And her journey is one that many of us can relate to. So, as she was turning 50 a couple of years ago, she realized that she had lost a bit of herself along the way through life and decided she was not going to find herself at 60 years old, not doing some of the things she wanted to do. So, she got started. And in that journey, we discuss, well, first off, how comfortable are you in your comfort zone? We talk about getting past fears and pursuing excitement. We talk about refining yourself, putting yourself on the list, and focusing on small changes. And I'm afraid this summary doesn't really do the episode justice because this episode really resonated deeply with me. I got a lot out of this conversation. In fact, particularly as I was going back through and re-listening to it, there's just so much good stuff here. And so I think you will find it hits home for you as well. You can find out more about Lisa at idopart2.com, and she talks about that in the episode. And before I get started, I just want to give a big thanks. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing this episode, all these episodes with your friends, with your family. You know, we now have listeners in 59 countries and continue to grow. But it's primarily from word of mouth. Don't really do any advertising. So please keep sharing episodes that you love with your friends. And if you did enjoy this episode, if you are enjoying the podcast, please leave a quick review. And I know there's a lot of different ways to do that, and it can be kind of cumbersome. So I've tried to simplify it as much as I can. If you go to just www.lovethepodcast.com/midlife mastery. So lovethepodcast.com/midlife mastery. And leave a review there. And that site makes it really simple and really easy. And by leaving a review, it lets me know what you really enjoy about the show so I can keep improving it, making it more valuable for you. And it helps others learn about the show so more people can benefit from it and find their own path to creating that phenomenal midlife. So, are you ready to play bigger? Are you ready to think about how do we create this phenomenal midlife? And really, the title of this episode is, What Are You Waiting For? Let's get started. Lisa, and actually, I know you originally from just your handle on Instagram, which is I Do Part 2.
Yes.
And so, quick introduction, who are you? And what is I Do Part 2 about?
All right. Thank you. You know, especially by midlife, we all have so many chapters that we've gone through. And so I Do Part 2 seem like a natural progression. And I'm at this point in my life a midlife enthusiast. My name is Lisa Speers, and I have 3 children who are all growing and moving out of the house, except my oldest has autism. And he is extremely independent, and he works at a car dealership 5 days a week, 5 mornings a week, and has lots of activities, but he's still living at home. And that was made abundantly clear during COVID that that's the right decision for now. And so we'll continue to look at different things for him. But I have 2 other kids in college, and at this point in my life, it was time to get over my fear of putting my writing out there and putting some thoughts out there. And I just really wanted to get started blogging. I'd been wanting to do it for 12 years. I'd put it off for a while.
Just a little bit. So
Yes.
tell us a little bit about that. Because I mean, there's been lots of things in my life that, it took a while for me to get to. Like, it had been stewing for a bit and
Right.
a bit, and then finally did it. And of course, many times once you do something, it's like, oh, well, that wasn't so hard. What took me so long? That's fun. Don't know if you experienced that, but tell us about this. So over a decade between like, hey, I should start a blog and starting a blog. What was that journey like for you?
Well, it really started 10 or 12 years ago. It started, I wanted to write something that could get published in a magazine, like an actual paper magazine. And in those days, I mean, I literally went to the library to figure out how to do that. And it said that you could not be published unless you were published. Well, a lot of people at the time took an extra step and realized that this blogging world was starting about 12, 15 years ago. But for me, I had a fear of the technology, trying to overcome the technology. It wasn't as easy back in the day and as it is today, just to get on Facebook and start sharing your thoughts. That's not how it was. And so there was a fear of technology. There was a fear of putting myself out there. There was a fear of, is my writing good enough? And finally, at 50, which was now 2.5 years ago, I thought, I am not going to be sitting here at 60 and haven't done some of these things that I want to do, blogging, which was one of them. And at the time, my son was graduating from high school, and I was sitting around with a bunch of great moms, and we were talking about, our fears going forward and the things that we were really excited about. And that is what I wanted to write about. I wanted to find out what people were doing to really rock this time in their life and really keep moving toward their purpose. And so that's really kind of how I overcame. I just started in very small incremental steps. I started researching and started writing. And little by little, I kind of found my voice, which I'm still working on. I think we're always still trying to find our voice. And as far as finding my purpose, one of the things I've found in the last couple of years is that's a lot of pressure on people. Some people find that as a lot of pressure to find their purpose. And so I like to say that I'm moving toward my purpose. There's parts of my purpose that I feel really comfortable with. I would love to serve in a capacity that I could share some of the things I've learned along the way in my marriage, in my life, raising my kids. And if that wisdom is a service to others, that's wonderful. But I think there's so much more. And so I don't know that I've necessarily found my purpose, but I definitely feel like I'm so much more in sync with where I would like to be.
When you talk about finding purpose, I think a lot of us do get stuck there. And I've heard others give the advice to, don't worry about your purpose, just be purposeful, act with purpose. And, obviously you did that. You started the blog, started writing, started putting yourself out there. Now, for you, what helped with that transition? I mean, what could others learn from you, or what advice could you give to others who are, whether it's blogging and writing, or starting a business, or just being out there more socially, or starting a new hobby, or whatever it is that is kind of in their brain, but they're nervous about doing it? What did you learn that you could share with them?
I think one of the biggest things that I learned is that the people that, if you're afraid of failure, then I imagine you're afraid of what other people are going to think. And when you're getting started on something, there's not a ton of people in your audience, for one. You actually have a lot of room to move and pivot and make changes. And also, if you're a beginner, you're not supposed to know how to do something. If we put it in a mindset of how we think about our children, we wouldn't expect to put them on a bike and that they can simply take off and do that. I know some kids can, but for the most part, they can't. And so you need to start out small. You need support. I have found reaching out to people in the community, in the writing community, blogging community, podcast community, have been incredibly supportive and almost always willing to help, and some going above and beyond. As far as some of the how-to advice, honestly, whether you are fixing your vacuum cleaner or starting a blog, almost everything is available on YouTube. And so you just have to put your own unique spin on it. And, if you want to get back to playing the piano again, are you taking lessons? Sometimes it's just the simplest, things. And, I have a friend that wanted to be a fitness instructor. Well, first she got really good at what classes that she was interested in doing. And it actually, with her having that intention, and it's kind of been the same for me, her intention to do that attracted the attention of the owners, and it's all working itself out for her to intern and begin that process. So I just think you need to take small steps. And often with anything that you're trying, you can actually back up the idea of all the different pieces that need to happen in order to get to point B. And different people can help you do that. You can brainstorm with friends. You can brainstorm with your spouse. You could reach out to someone in a similar industry. But there's just a lot of help. And this is the information age. There's so much information available to help us.
Yeah, there's a lot of truth there. YouTube is, I agree, is absolutely wonderful. It has not failed me, whether it's replacing a starter on my wife's truck, rebuilding a cell phone, whatever it is, there is a video out there for it. So a couple of things struck me. Some of the advice, I didn't get it directly, but I heard someone say this, and they were talking about podcasting. And I found this helpful, but I think it would apply to any creative endeavor where you're kind of putting yourself out there in the world. And the person had said that, if when you look back, you're not embarrassed by your first work, you waited too long to get started.
Yes, I've heard something similar along those lines. And, and I recently heard someone say, everybody talks about getting out of your comfort zone. And then someone took it a step further and said, how comfortable are you in your comfort zone? Okay, well, I wasn't very comfortable. I knew something was missing in my life, and I felt like, what is happening? I have a pretty awesome relationship with my husband. My kids are doing great. And I just feel like something's missing. And I felt like that for years. I mean, I talk about, putting off blogging for 12 years. In that time period, I was volunteering, I was doing all these different things. I was busy. I was not just sitting around, and anybody that has one child or 3 or 6 or whatever is busy. And so I was always busy, but I didn't feel completely fulfilled. And one of the things that I really encourage young men and women to do is really be intentional. If they're in a career, or you're married and in a career working inside the house, outside the home, but you're just feeling like you're missing something, really sit back and think about it. I didn't do that because I just felt like I have everything I need. Why am I not happy? But I made the mistake that I made was so simple. I wish I would have thought about it. I stopped doing anything that Lisa used to, like to do. I mean, I kind of lost Lisa along the way. I skied in high school. I stopped skiing. I used to write and journal. I stopped doing that. There were just a lot of things that I kind of put off to the wayside while raising kids. And I don't think, maybe I couldn't have done what I'm doing now with lots of kids under tow. I know some people do it, and I admire them for doing that. But I certainly could have done a piece of it. I could have kept writing. And certainly by the time Facebook and MySpace became a thing, I could have started putting my work out there, but it was the fear that had held me back. And so I just really encourage you, if you feel like you're missing something, whether it's working out or bike riding or horseback riding or whatever it is, to try to get back to that piece of you, because what's going to happen is, as you feel better about yourself, all these other parts of your life are going to start to blossom. And that's probably one of the biggest benefits that my husband and I have seen. And he said, gosh, I feel really bad. He never stopped me from doing anything, and he always encouraged me, but I didn't really think about what was missing with any real intentional, as far as being very intentional about it. And so that's probably one of the biggest benefits, is that by me feeling better, there's just has exponential benefits to our marriage if everybody feels better about themselves.
A few minutes ago, you had mentioned being a midlife enthusiast, and
Yes.
I love that. And so tell us more about that. What does that mean for you to be a midlife enthusiast?
It really means trying new things and really, as we said, stepping out of your comfort zone. But when I hit 50, it was just like, what am I waiting for? And so, my husband had said, gosh, one of the things we really do together was ski. And I would love it if you would get back to snow skiing. Well, it takes a lot of strength, flexibility, energy, endurance to snow ski. And I had kind of let it go for 20 years, even though it had been part of my entire childhood up through college. And so, I've had to work on getting back in shape to do that and just kind of really intentionally going after some of these things. Obviously, in the last couple of years, I haven't done a lot of traveling, but travel was something I used to do. And so I really made an intentional point of going on some really neat trips that I wanted to go, one with my daughter and a couple with my husband. And so just trying to get back to some of those things that really make you feel alive, and really working on staying in touch with friends, old and new. I mean, one of the biggest benefits about blogging has been getting to know people from all over the country and even a few from across the pond. So it's been a fantastic journey. And I'm just really trying to say yes to things I really want to do that I feel are interesting and give me, and are energizing, and then say no to some of the things that have kind of weighed me down over the years.
I love the practicality and the simplicity of it, of just what you're talking about there, Lisa. The idea that, yeah, over time, I suspect many of us feel this. We either consciously set things aside, or probably even more often, they just kind of fall by the wayside. We just do it less and less and less, and then we just don't do it anymore. And we kind of forget about those pieces, and also don't realize that at any moment we can remember them, we can go back to them, or we can find something new that fits. That's such a simple thing to do. And that's not necessarily an easy thing to do, because like you mentioned, get back to snow skiing, there's, many things that you had to do to get to where you're feeling comfortable getting back on the ski slopes. But, just that approach of kind of thinking about what is it that really lit you up? What is it that you really enjoyed? And you don't have to return to your life when you were 20, but there are pieces of it that maybe you can connect back to. And you mentioned earlier, just starting small. Now, I'm putting words in your mouth at this point, so tell me if I'm off here. But we don't have to overhaul our entire life at once. From what you're saying is, we can find those little pieces, and we don't have to become pro blogger on day one. We can just start the little snippets and build from there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would really encourage anyone who's listening and wants to try something, go after the lowest hanging fruit. What is something that maybe it's just working out more consistently? Maybe it's just eating more healthy because now you've turned 40 and over, and you know that you shouldn't be eating as much, white sugar and white carbs. Maybe you have been trying to be more consistent on having, journaling. Whatever it is, I think just starting with small, implementing it into your daily routine. And when things start no longer serving you, move on. But what I have found, and what I kind of lights me up, and where this midlife enthusiast comes from, is as I've started walking this path and gone through, one door, so to speak, 2 or 3 doors have opened for me, and things that I never thought of. I mean, some of the things that I'm looking forward to doing in 2022, I won't, I wouldn't have visualized that I would be doing. So I'm just really looking forward to where the next chapter takes me. And I'm just open to lots of different ideas.
Yeah, that's a neat part that we often forget, that just, action begets action, momentum begets momentum. Just once you start, you don't necessarily know where it goes, but until you start, you're not going anywhere.
Exactly.
So let's talk a little bit. You had mentioned just the idea that once you started, you mentioned being uncomfortable with your comfort zone. And once you started looking for those things that are fulfilling, it started to affect you. You started showing up differently. It sounds like your husband noticed you showing up differently. I'm assuming that affected the relationship in a positive way. And I know one of the things that you write about is kind of this midlife marriage piece. And so what are some of the things that you've learned or some of the advice you can give for those who are, well, like the listeners here in midlife and, married?
Exactly. Well, first of all, I really need to give credit to my husband because he kind of started this journey before I did in terms of, looking inward. And I saw how enthusiastic he got about life and different things. And I've kind of came along. And that is what a licensed therapist will probably tell you is that you can't change the other person. You start changing yourself, and someone's either going to really like what they see and they're going to want to come along or not. And that's a whole nother conversation to have. But I think that what I am really seeing with couples who are willing to share what they're going through is a lot of couples have not talked in a long time about everything from how they can meet each other's needs to finances, to division of labor, to what they really want to do for fun. I mean, they've just kind of stopped talking. Not everyone, but these are the couples that I'm hearing from. And one of the challenges my husband and I ran into when the kids were toddlers, so this is about 15 years ago, is we kind of hit this point where we were going through the motions. We were, you're busy with 3 little kids, one who has autism, or getting up, making breakfast, running them to all their different places. And so at that time, I really credit my husband because he sat down and said, we need to do something different. He said, we need help. And so it started us on this journey. And I have to tell you, the way that I was raised, I was really uncomfortable going to a counselor. I think that a lot of us in the Gen X generation, that's just not something our parents did. It wasn't something I was comfortable with, but I highly recommend it. And we continue to both see counselors just for maintenance. But it's sure nice when life throws you a curveball to have somebody already in your corner to talk to. So I highly recommend that. I think that couples can sit down and be very intentional about what they want their midlife to look like. I mean, goodness, if you're 50 years old, there is a darn good chance that you're going to be alive for another 40 to 50 years. What do you want that to look like? And so those are some of the conversations that we've had. And part of that is my husband wants me to be snow skiing with him through with my 80s. So I don't know if that's going to happen, but gosh, I'm going to try, I'm really going to try. And then I want him to go hiking with me, which he does. And there's different things. And I've even started to play golf. I know there's a lot of women joke about, whether to play golf or not, but I've really come to enjoy, 9 holes of golf with friends and then dinner. So I think really talking about these different things. But one of the first things that people need to do, if they haven't already, is start putting themselves on the list, because you can't change your partner, but you can change yourself. And so start focusing on the things that you feel that would make you feel better and go from there. I think that's an important place to start.
You highlight something that I suspect is very common. You'd mentioned that oftentimes we not that we stopped talking to our partner, but we talked about different things. I mean, I just think back before my wife and I had kids, and we were young, and it was about kind of dreams and future and what's this going to look like. And after a few years, it becomes very tactical conversations, like, who's got which kid, who's watching what, who's got dinner, who's, just getting through life conversations. And those are important because, you need to keep the children alive. You need to make sure there's food in the fridge and all that. But we can drift away from kind of those bigger picture conversations that you're talking about, and even just get out of the habit of those, or forget, like you say, that, odds are hopefully good. We're looking at another 40 years here. And so what's that going to look like? Because, 40 years ago, we were talking very big picture. We were dreaming. We were, kind of planning together in those things. And so anyway, I'm just kind of thinking about what you had said there. And that makes a lot of sense to me. And you'd also mentioned just putting yourself on the list, not worrying about changing your spouse or partner, but really just kind of focusing on yourself. And so for you, I know it sounds like it started with kind of the blogging piece, but what were some other pieces for yourself when you started putting yourself on the list that kind of just came into place for you?
Well, they're coming into place. Yeah,
Fair enough.
I am a work in progress. Probably the one that's been this most sticky is being consistent on moving. I don't even want to say working out, but having a consistent practice, a consistent routine. And I used to look at working out as an ends to a means, but now I look at it as it's really a lifestyle. I mean, if I hadn't, and I didn't have a consistent way of staying fit at 50, I am going to need it going forward. And, we kind of all can look toward our parents if they're still living and what they're dealing with. And so the quicker that we can get on it and be more consistent, whether we're just walking or lifting weights or whatever it is we're doing. So that's one area that by kind of moving and getting excited about life again and all these other different things, that's one area. Being willing to go golfing, skiing, being willing to go on a podcast, all these different things have opened doors. And just with each little thing, it builds a little more confidence, even though maybe I'm trying something new, but I have a little bit more of a foundation behind me.
Well, one of the things, so I mean, I'm kind of going from topic to topic here,
No,
but so we talk about marriage and midlife, and also just kind of stepping out a little bit, putting yourself on the list, exploring those things that are important to you. Well, one of the reasons that we tend to have more time to do that, or more space to do that, is, if we have kids, we're kind of at the age where they're, if not out of the house, are pretty independent and don't require as much from us. For you, what have you discovered about kind of that shift to empty nest, or mostly empty nest?
Well, I'll tell you, probably one of the biggest things that has helped me, and I highly recommend this if someone has their youngest in high school, kind of age, is getting started on whatever it is on the path, at least on the path, prior to your youngest leaving the house. And my mom's 81. She's still in real estate. And she just says, well, they keep calling, so I keep renewing my license. Anyway, she's been rocking real estate for like 40 years. And with 6 kids, she's a pretty amazing lady. But anyhow, a few years before my youngest graduated from high school, she said, have you thought about what you're going to do? And I said, well, I've been thinking about this writing thing. And she's like, well, whatever it is, get started before Kate is her name, get started before Kate graduates. And that's what I did. I spent a year though in the prep mode before I started. But that was great because from the moment they left, I had a whole new network of people to talk to. I had a whole new routine to go after. I had all these different things. And so that's my biggest recommendation, is at least start the research on whatever it is, because you may start in one area and go in a completely different direction. But start, if you can, before your kids leave the nest. And if not, it's never too late.
We often define ourselves through other people, so our parent or spouse, whatever. How have you noticed how you define yourself changing as you're becoming a midlife enthusiast and your kids are leaving? How do you find yourself thinking about yourself differently than maybe you did 4 or 5 years ago?
That's a great question. I think a lot of women, I can only speak for women, and maybe it's just all Gen Xers, but, I grew up kind of living life within the lines. I was one of 6 kids. Certain things were expected of me. I kind of played the good girl and just walked a straight line. And so anything that was a little bit out of the ordinary, a little bit out of the comfort zone, was really hard for me to make that leap. And I just work really hard to look at what I would like to do. And it just isn't as scary as it used to be. I just take small steps along the way. I am out in Nike country, and there's just do it billboards all over the place. But I haven't just done it. I've just taken one step at a time, and I'm moving quicker and being more consistent on my journey. And it's easier, as we talked about, as you go down the path and different doors open, you have more confidence to walk through the next door.
Well, as we start to wrap up here, Lisa, so you mentioned that things are opening up that you wouldn't have expected even a couple of years ago. So what are some of the things that you're looking forward to in 2022?
I'm looking forward to doing more live interviews. There's some speaking engagements that are coming up that are possibly live, but maybe online. And so that's something that's kind of secondary to the blogging. So I wouldn't have expected, that to happen. There'll be more travel in 2022. So I'm just really excited about the future and what it holds. And I'm not as hindered by my fear as I have been in the past. That's the biggest part.
Love that. That's a great place to be. So where can people find you, Lisa, if they want to, read some of your writing, learn more about you, keep up with your journeys?
Absolutely. You can find me at idopart2.com, IDOPARTTWO, not, it's all spelled out.com. And that can take you to my Instagram handle, Facebook handle, and provide lots of information. And I'm open to having writers submit articles. As you'll see, it's a collaborative blog, and that's really where I'm at. I think that the future for all of us, like we're doing today, is collaborating. So I'm totally open to accepting writing proposals.
Oh, fantastic. And I agree. I firmly believe, rising tide raises all ships, that collaboration piece, just we only get better from it.
Brock, thank you so much. This has been really fun. I really appreciate it.